Yo, what's going on, my buddies? TotalJophes coming at you with my review of I Am Setsuna. Okay, so if you guys have kept up with my channel at all, or my Twitter or anything like that, you know I've been playing the hell out of I Am Setsuna, and I already released a video that was sort of like a pre-review that was my thoughts so far on the game as far as I had gotten in it at that point, which was fairly far. So I figured, you know, it wasn't too bad to release a video of my thoughts so far, because I pretty much grasped most of what the game had to offer. Now, we are on to the official review, where I will be giving everything scores. Out of 10 for the story, graphics, and the gameplay, and then final score out of 30 for the overall review of the game. So, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so usually how I go with my game reviews, I usually start off with the story. Now, the story is definitely the strong suit, at least in my opinion. Most reviews of I Am Setsuna have been positive, but there have been the occasional one that's like, it doesn't quite live up to expectations. It leaves something to be desired, yada yada yada. I'll say one thing. My biggest bitch about this game is probably that it's too short. It's only about 20-25 hours, roughly, give or take. Which isn't bad. It's good, but, you know, it's not as big as a good JRPG should be. A good JRPG, in my opinion, should draw nothing less than 40 hours. And that's just like with the main story. I'm not even talking about side content. But, you know, even with the side content, I would be at least comfortable with 40 hours. I wouldn't be great, but that's not the point anyway. This is the story, and that's kind of getting into the gameplay. So, kind of a little bit of a story. But the story, I will try not to spoil anything, but if you've looked up anything about the game, you know that the basis of the game is that this girl, Setsuna, is responsible for going to the other side of the world and sacrificing herself to keep monsters at bay. And yeah, that's pretty much what the game revolves around, is that there's all sorts of tons of monsters in the world, and they're getting more numerous, more powerful, more clever and intelligent, and there's a tradition that goes on that, you know, every few years, like I think it was every 10 years, a young girl from this village will go to what's called the Last Lands and sacrifice themselves, which sort of keeps the monsters at bay. And think basically Final Fantasy X. Like, this game definitely drew a lot of inspiration off of other games. Clearly, it drew a lot from Chrono Trigger. I saw a lot from Final Fantasy X. I saw a little bit of Xeno in there. I'd say maybe from a few other Final Fantasies. Not to mention there's also Easter eggs in the form of weapons and shit. Like, I've got Nadir or Nieder, whatever, however the fuck you pronounce his name. There's no voice acting, at least the Japanese voice acting, but, you know. But I've got him with the Buster Sword on his back, and that's pretty fucking awesome. But, yeah, so that's basically the basis of the story. It definitely takes a lot of twists and turns, and I won't spoil those, but just because of how much it does, that it is a very in-depth story that is never quite what you think it's going to be. There is a lot of twists and turns. It really gives you a lot of points in time where you're questioning whether what you're doing is right or not. You're questioning whether you're actually going to be able to change anything, that sort of stuff, and I love that. Not to mention, each of the characters I felt was very lovable. I mean, Endir, the main character, he's meant to be that sort of silent protagonist where his only personality is in the choices you make. So naturally, he doesn't have a whole lot to him. So I won't go too far really into his lovability, but at least all of the other characters were amazing. I mean, they even made you feel for the... I won't spoil, but the character that you get at the end of the game, they even make you feel for him. It's like, wow. I did not think I'd actually feel for him. But, yeah, I loved each and every character in there, and they all had, like, their own little story arcs, like, throughout the game, and it was amazing that way. Like, I love games that actually... I really hate to keep ripping on Star Ocean when I did like the game, but Star Ocean Integrity and Faithlessness gave you no time with the characters whatsoever. The only characters that had any sort of development were Fidel, Miki. That might have been it. But this game, every character is so well written. Every character has a full little story arc behind them, has a lot of character growth and development, and it is amazing. The story itself is sad as fuck, and my only real bitch when it comes to the story is the ending is kind of sad. Now, you might be assuming that that's a given, considering that the game is about Setsuna sacrificing herself, but again, I won't spoil anything, but it's not that simple. And when it comes right down to it, the ending felt a little bit forcefully sad. Like, it didn't have to be sad, and it was set up to not be sad, but then they made it sad just, like, at the last second because they really wanted it to be sad. Like, that's what it felt like to me. In fact, I'll go a little bit more into specifics. Spoilers, if you don't want to hear this, go a little bit forward in the video. But at the end, the main villain, who is pretty much just called the Youth, he was a giant monster called the Dark Sansara, but he doesn't have an actual name, so they just call him the Youth. But he's dying and he's fading away, and Setsuna just out of the blue decides she's going to die with him to keep him company and make him happy. And it's like, that. I know Setsuna's like really all over the whole making people happy and fighting for them and stuff, but that seems really out of left field, considering there really wasn't any reason for that outside of she felt bad for him. And I don't feel like feeling bad for him was enough for her to just give her life for him. I mean, considering she had so much to go back to, she had all her friends, she saved the world, she probably really wanted to see all of the changes she made unfold, but yet she just gives that all up just to die with him to keep him company and make him happy. And it's like, why? Yes, it kind of falls into Setsuna's character, because she is this very loving, caring person, but it's a little far, even for her, and it really feels like they shoved that in there at the last second because they really wanted the ending to be sad. And I think that's stupid, honestly. But all in all, regardless, that's only one thing. And the rest of the story, I have no complaints about. It is definitely, piece by piece, very good quality JRPG, and my only bitches is that I wish it was longer, and the ending felt a bit forcefully sad. Final score for the story, 9 out of 10. Because even though there are those two little bitches that I have, that it's not that long, and that the sad ending kind of felt forced, the story itself was amazing. Like, it had me at the edge of my seat all the time. It was very emotionally driven. There was happy, there was sad, there was angry, there was fear, there was everything. And it was very, very well written. So, there we go. Okay, so now we are going on to the graphics. Now, for the graphics, this game is stylized to be like a Golden Age RPG, so they didn't go the full extra mile of making it look like Final Fantasy 15 or the Final Fantasy 7 remake or, Skyrim or Fallout or anything like that. They went specifically for a style of graphics where it looks like a JRPG, just made with new age graphics. So it's not 2D little dinky sprites or anything, it's fully 3D, but kind of on a 2D scale, If you look up anything about the game, you'll understand exactly what I mean. But because of that, naturally, the graphics aren't going to be, holy shit, realistic or anything, but that's fine. That's not what it's aiming to be. It's aiming to be like a JRPG, and because that's what it's aiming to be, it absolutely scores max points for that. It is definitely, it looks perfectly like a JRPG. 100%. Down to every little thing. And so I have no complaints about that. Now, when it comes to the actual, the graphics, not just the graphic style, but the actual quality of the graphics, everything's fucking beautiful. The scenery is very, very beautiful. The snow, every time you go by water, everything like that, it is all very, very beautiful. But I do have a big-ass bitch when it comes to the graphics. And that major bitch is that it's all the same thing. There's maybe, 4 or 5 different kinds of areas you're going to be in. Snowy forest, snowy mountain, icy cave, snowy village, and ancient ruiny dungeon sort of thing. That's it. That's it. Now, yes, it is a game that takes place in a snow-covered continent. Obviously, it's gonna pretty much have just, snowy everything, but all the same, they kind of, I feel like they could have put a little bit more in there, They didn't have to make every cave look identical. They didn't have to make every forest look identical. They didn't have to make every mountain look identical. And I get why. It's because this is kind of a smaller game. And it's because it probably didn't get, the most amazing actual, budget for this game, because it was Tokyo RPG Factory's first foray into actually making games. So I think because of that, it suffered, and it is definitely smaller scale, and there isn't a lot of variety in that. But a lot of things in this game make me look forward to if this game gets a sequel, which I'll talk about that at the end. It very well could get a sequel, and honestly, I have high hopes and opinions that it will, but I'll talk about that at the end. But yes, the graphics are beautiful, but I really wish they did more with them, and I understand why they didn't. That's not enough reason to hate on the game, but all the same, I have to be honest with the score. So score for the graphics is 7 out of 10. Because it is beautiful, but there's no variety in anywhere that you go, and everything looks the same. It's all beautiful, but it's the same beauty every time. Alright, now on to the final part, which is the gameplay. Now, the gameplay, I honestly don't have much of a bitch about that. In fact, the only bitch I really have, again, is just that it's too short of a game altogether. Now, the gameplay, it plays a lot like, JRPGs. You do have an active time battle gauge that fills, and you can fight, and a lot of the battle depends on where the monsters are on the screen, because they walk around during battle, and they get in different positions and shit. And, you have moves that will affect a certain radius, and however many monsters have wandered into that radius will get hurt by it. Which, that's really cool. And then on top of that, they have a really good upgrading system. You level up, like in every JRPG, of course. But on top of that, rather than learning abilities, you buy them. Which, think kind of like Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 2, that sort of thing, where you buy spells, except you buy all of your abilities. And you equip them on them with these things called talismans, which each talisman allows for a certain number of different kinds of abilities. Which I think, if I remember correctly, there was support, command, and all. All lets you have either support or command, it doesn't matter. And then there's support slots and command slots. Command slots on a talisman, you can put in command abilities. Support slots on a talisman, you can put in support abilities. And then the all slot, you can just put in what the fuck ever. But that did definitely give you a big way to customize your characters. You can give them whatever abilities that that you want them to have. They do learn certain abilities, like, for instance, Eterna learns, time-based abilities, and Julian learns, ice-based abilities, and you can't give Eterna ice-based abilities, and you can't give Julian time-based abilities. But all the same, you get a lot of abilities to choose from, and you can customize which ones that you want. And on top of that, each ability can be customized with sort of mini-abilities, like using less MP, or having a certain element of damage added onto it, or things like that. And it allows for a very, very big degree of customization when it comes to the gameplay, which is amazing. And something that I really love about this game is that everything has lore to it. I talked about this in my pre-review, but I'll mention it again in case you haven't seen that. Even the weapons, just the weapons in general, not certain weapons, but just the weapon category in general, has lore to it. It's not just basic, iron sword forged by a blacksmith or something. No. It's never that. It's some sort of very rare fantasy material that was forged by some evil wizard for the purpose of killing this, that sort of thing. And on top of that, like I said, the weapons in general have lore. Weapons aren't just weapons, they are specifically tools to kill monsters. Now, that might go without saying, but I mean this in the sense that monsters can't be killed by normal means. They can only be killed by something that's imbued with magical energy, and every weapon is imbued with magical energy. And therefore, not every person can use weapons, because not every person has an ability to use that magical energy. So you see, even the weapons have lore to them, because they're not just weapons. They're magical tools that not everyone can use, that are crafted specifically for the purpose of fighting off monsters. That's cool. And I love that. A lot of effort goes in to putting lore into this game, which is amazing. It gives you a lot to go off of. You really get a full understanding of what this world is like. Each of the monsters, each of the characters, each of the locations, everything. And I love that so much. So much. Now, let's see. What else to talk about with the gameplay? For the most part, the rest plays out a lot like, your usual JRPG. You go through dungeons, you go through towns, you buy your items, so on and so forth, which is amazing. It definitely nails the JRPG style gameplay, which is very nostalgic and very, very amazing for those of you that loved the Golden Age RPGs. Again, my major bitch is that it's just too short. However, I do have a minor little quarrel as well. A lot of times in the combat, you kind of feel like you have a little bit of an over-reliance on your MP, and you don't have an endless amount of MP. In fact, you have a little bit less than I would say a lot of other JRPGs give you. Now, it's not to the degree that Ni no Kuni is. Ni no Kuni has a very big over-reliance on MP, and you get shit levels of MP, and, no way to recover it. There is ways to recover it, but they're ridiculously expensive. I Am Setsuna isn't that bad. You can definitely recover it, no problems. Ethers really aren't that expensive. But all the same, I didn't like that it had a little bit of an over-reliance on your abilities and magic. Because whereas you could just physically attack, it doesn't get you very far when you're just physically attacking. You really feel like you have to be using your abilities and your magic and stuff like that. And whereas that's awesome, you don't really have a lot of MP to be doing that with. So the over-reliance on MP I could have done without, but all the same, final score for the gameplay, 9 out of 10. Because it is damn near perfect. The gameplay is spot on, flawless, and only has a few minor things that I could possibly bitch about. So there you have it, guys. There's my review of I Am Setsuna. And, yeah, like I said, it is an amazing game. The final score for the game is 25 out of 30. And that's because this game it's so good. The only things I can really say that was bad is that it just felt like, it was smaller scale. It probably didn't get a huge budget to make the game with. But here's my resolution to that. Think about it this way. Tokyo RPG Factory was just made, and for the sole purpose of crafting JRPGs of the Golden Age. Now, I Am Setsuna did well enough to where most people did rate it really well. Most people did love it. And so I wouldn't imagine that, since they are just making JRPGs, that they would just move on to their next JRPG. I would imagine that since they put so much effort into establishing the lore of this game, and the fact that the game did really well, I would imagine that they would probably make a sequel if they're smart, because the demand is already there. People are really liking this game, and they already put so much effort into it. And I feel like now that this game has done well, they might get a bigger budget. Like, Square Enix might be more comfortable with them putting a bit more effort into this, and they might give them a bit more tools to work at it with. So I'm really hoping I Am Setsuna gets a sequel, because this was an amazing game, and if it gets a sequel, then we can take it as this is sort of like a cocoon of a game. And that the sequel would be this amazing fucking butterfly of a game coming out of that cocoon. With a bigger budget, they could give us a bigger world, maybe branch outside of the winter stuff. Give us more continents to explore. They could give us, more gameplay, actual English voice acting. They could give us CGI cutscenes, but I still want the actual game itself to be stuck, looking like a JRPG, because that's what it's meant to be. But I just feel like they could have an endless amount of potential for a sequel. So, all in all, I loved the game. I really, really wanted to get a sequel because I feel like that could be amazing. They can make it so much better. Did you guys play the game? If you did, definitely tell me what you thought about it. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Were you kind of on the fence about it? Definitely leave all that in the comment section down below. Definitely leave a like on this video. And definitely subscribe for future videos because I'll be uploading multiple videos every week as usual. So, that'd be about it. So until next time, stay pretty, my buddies.